Nirvana didn't just change grunge, they changed how bands chose who to work with. Kurt Cobain's raw honesty and refusal to play by industry rules made them unpredictable, fearless, and often controversial. At the height of their fame, they turned down tours with some huge bands. Here are 10 bands Nirvana refused to tour with, and the surprising reasons why. At number 10, we have Skid Row. Nirvana refused to tour with them because they felt Skid Row's attitude was homophobic and went against everything grunge stood for. Skid Row invited Nirvana to open for them during their Slave to the Grind tour back in 1991. This was right after their album hit number 1 on the charts. It sold 134,000 copies in the first week, massive numbers for a heavy metal album at the time. Skid Row was also supporting Guns N' Roses on the massive Use Your Illusion tour around the same time. They were one of the biggest hair metal bands at that time in the early 90s scene. But Nirvana turned them down flat, without any hesitation about the decision they were making. Kurt even talked about turning them down in an interview that same year. He said that not just Guns N' Roses, but bands like Rush and Skid Row all wanted Nirvana to open for them. To Kurt, Skid Row was just another band they wanted nothing to do with. The main reason was that Nirvana found Skid Row to be too homophobic in their behavior and image. What really pushed Nirvana away was a huge controversy involving their singer, Sebastian Bach. In 1989, Bach was photographed wearing a shirt that said, "AIDS kills fags dead," and it shocked everyone. It was supposed to be a joke, a play on the Raid bug spray slogan, but it came across as hateful. Kurt Loder from MTV, who is got the picture and put it on MTV News immediately. The image caused huge controversy in the music world and damaged Skid Row's reputation with many fans. Bach later claimed he grabbed the shirt backstage without thinking. He said a fan had thrown it on stage and he put it on without thinking about it. But this excuse made things worse instead of better for his reputation and the band's image. Even their bassist, Rachel Bolan, said he warned Bach not to wear it. Bach did it anyway, and the damage was done to their reputation forever. Complex magazine later named it one of the 50 worst rock fails of all time in music history. For Kurt Cobain, who was a strong supporter of LGBTQ rights, this was completely unforgivable behavior. Kurt wrote in the liner notes of Incesticide in 1992 that if you hate gay people, leave us alone. He told fans not to come to their shows or buy their records if they were homophobic at all. And that's why Nirvana wanted nothing to do with touring with Skid Row. At number 9, we have Ozzy Osbourne from the legendary band Black Sabbath. The Black Sabbath legend personally invited Nirvana to join his farewell tour, but Kurt shut it down immediately. Ozzy and Nirvana crossed paths at Devonshire Sound Studios in California in May 1991. Nirvana was there mixing their album Nevermind with producer Butch Vig. Ozzy was in another room down the hall working on his own project. During breaks, Kurt and Dave Grohl would hang out playing pool. Every time Ozzy walked past them, Kurt and Dave were totally starstruck. They couldn't believe they were seeing the legendary Black Sabbath frontman in person right there. But the encounters were awkward because Ozzy was heavily intoxicated during that period. Kurt talked about this in a 1991 interview. He said they would meet each other in the hall sometimes, but they didn't speak to each other. A few times, they were walking toward each other in the hallway at the same time. Kurt had to move up against the wall and wait for Ozzy to stumble past him slowly. That's how intoxicated Ozzy was during those studio sessions, according to Kurt's memory. Despite these awkward meetings, Ozzy still invited Nirvana to tour with him on his big tour. He wanted them on his 1992 No More Tours farewell tour. This was supposed to be Ozzy's final tour before retirement from the music business forever. Kurt told Gilbert Blechen that he could understand Ozzy liking Nirvana's music because it made sense. He said they had some similarities with Black Sabbath, at least in terms of heaviness and darkness. Kurt respected Ozzy and had always loved his music, except for his last 5 albums at that time. He was a fan of some of Ozzy's early solo music. But even with all that respect, Kurt still turned down the offer. He explained it would have been fun and kind of exciting to be part of Ozzy's last shows ever. However, Nirvana didn't really want to play in huge arenas supporting someone else at that point. Ozzy completely forgot about meeting Kurt until 2007 when Dave Grohl reminded him about those encounters. In a Launch Radio Network's interview, Ozzy recalled Dave telling him about the pool table encounters they had. Dave said he and Kurt were freaking out when Ozzy walked in the room back then. Ozzy later wrote in his 2009 biography, I Am Ozzy, that he was very proud Kurt was a fan. He thought Kurt was awesome and regretted not being more present during those encounters in the studio. At number 8, we have U2. Bono personally invited Nirvana to tour with them, but Kurt Cobain wanted nothing to do with it. He saw U2 as pompous, mainstream rock stars. On March 23, 1992, Nirvana attended U2's Zoo TV tour at the Montreal Forum in Canada. They weren't there for U2, they were there to watch the Pixies who were opening the show. But the night took an unexpected turn. During the concert, Dave Grohl was suddenly pulled backstage into Bono's dressing room without any warning. Bono spent almost an hour lecturing him about the dangers of success and fame in the music industry. Then he told Dave that Nirvana had to join U2 on their massive stadium tour around the world. Years later, in a Rolling Stone interview, Dave described how chaotic that year was for the band. Lollapalooza wanted Nirvana to headline the entire festival that summer. Guns N' Roses kept offering spots on their tour. And now U2 wanted them globally. Dave said he was thinking, what the heck is going on? Why are all these gigantic bands asking for us? But Nirvana turned down U2's invitation just as they turned down everyone else that year. Kurt refused to be an opening act in giant arenas. To Nirvana, U2 was the definition of giant corporate rock. It clashed completely with Nirvana's punk rock ethos and their underground credibility. At the time, Dave didn't even understand the ironic concept behind the Zoo TV tour. He told Bono that Nirvana was a punk band and they would never play big venues. Bono simply replied, "Never say never." And ironically, just 1 year later, Nirvana was headlining arenas themselves. But in 1992, Kurt Cobain believed touring with U2 would have been the ultimate sellout. At number 7, we have AC/DC. Kurt Cobain learned one of his very first guitar songs from AC/DC, but years later, he wanted nothing to do with them because of their sexist lyrics. When Kurt got his first guitar at age 14, AC/DC was one of the first bands he learned to play. He loved the heavy riffs and raw energy that came from their music. Back in Blacks was one of the first songs he learned to play on guitar. Kurt grew up listening to AC/DC alongside other hard rock bands like Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith during his childhood. But everything changed when he discovered punk rock in his late teens. Kurt started to see these classic rock bands through a completely different lens than before. He realized the lyrics made him very uncomfortable because they treated women like objects instead of people. In a 1992 Rolling Stone interview, Kurt admitted he enjoyed the melodies these bands created, but it took him years to understand that the lyrics had to do with sexism. He said they just wrote about their private parts and having sex all the time. This really bothered him during his last years of high school when he was figuring himself out. Kurt's manager, Danny Goldberg, confirmed this view in a 2019 Forbes interview when promoting his book. Goldberg said Kurt appreciated the music of AC/DC and Led Zeppelin from a purely musical standpoint, but as he got older and more aware, the lyrics no longer sat right with him. Kurt saw these lyrics as wrong and completely against his feminist values that he held dear. Kurt sold his entire AC/DC collection, along with his Led Zeppelin and Aerosmith records, for $12 total. He threw away his hard rock roots completely and embraced bands like MDC and Black Flag. Instead, even though Nirvana covered some classic rock songs for fun during various recording sessions over the years, Kurt never wanted to tour with these bands from his past. He refused to be associated with musicians who wrote lyrics about women in their songs. So, these are the reasons Kurt rejected everything AC/DC represented, despite loving their music as a young kid. At number 6, we have Rush. Rush invited Nirvana to open for them on their Roll the Bones tour from October 1991 to July 1992. Their album, Roll the Bones, had reached number 3 on the US album chart at that time. Rush was playing huge arenas across North America and Europe throughout that entire tour period. This would have been a massive opportunity for Nirvana to reach new audiences and gain more fans, but Kurt Cobain turned them down in the same way he refused other major acts that year. In his November 1991 interview with Gilbert Blechen in Berlin, Kurt explained the situation clearly. When asked about tour offers, Kurt said that Rush, Skid Row, and others had approached them. He grouped Rush with all the corporate rock bands Nirvana wanted to avoid at that time. Kurt gave a simple reason for refusing the tour offer from the legendary progressive rock band. He said Nirvana didn't really want to play in huge arenas supporting someone else right now. If Nirvana was going to play big venues, Kurt wanted them to be headliners on their own. He didn't want to ride on anybody else's success or use them to climb up the ladder. This decision was surely disappointing for Dave Grohl, who loved Rush with all his heart since childhood. Dave was a massive fan of Rush drummer Neil Peart since he was a young kid in Virginia. When Dave got the album 2112 at age 8, it changed the direction of his entire life. He heard Neil Peart's drums and immediately wanted to become a drummer himself after that moment. Dave later called inducting Rush into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame one of the most special nights. He described the performance as both terrifying and amazing at the same time for him personally. When Neil Peart died in 2020, Dave posted an emotional tribute online for everyone to see. He called Kurt an inspiration to millions with an unmistakable sound who spawned generations of musicians worldwide. Dave said Kurt was a kind, thoughtful, brilliant man who ruled their radios and turntables growing up. But despite Dave's personal love for Rush, the band's decision stood firm at that time. Kurt didn't want Nirvana to be an opening act for anyone, no matter how legendary they were. Coming in at number 5 is Pearl Jam. Kurt Cobain publicly called Pearl Jam corporate sellouts and fake grunge. It sparked one of the biggest feuds in rock history. Kurt Cobain waged a public war against Pearl Jam in multiple interviews throughout 1992 and beyond. In Musician magazine, he called them corporate alternative cock rock fusion. In his April 1992 Flipside interview, Kurt said he had strong feelings toward Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains. He called them corporate puppets, just trying to jump on the alternative bandwagon for money. Kurt said these bands had been in the hairspray and cock rock scene for many years before grunge. Then suddenly they stopped washing their hair and started wearing flannel shirts instead to fit in. It didn't make any sense to him, and it really offended him on a personal level. Kurt was especially angry because Nirvana was being lumped into the same category as these bands. He also told Rolling Stone that every article about Pearl Jam always included mentions of Nirvana too. He felt Pearl Jam was baiting this connection on purpose to gain credibility with underground fans. Kurt said he would love to be erased from his association with Pearl Jam and other corporate bands. He felt a duty to warn kids about false music claiming to be underground or alternative music. Kurt even called Pearl Jam a safe rock band that everyone likes without challenging them. He said they didn't challenge their audience as much as Nirvana did with their music choices. The main reason for Kurt's anger was loyalty to Mark Arm from Mudhoney, his favorite band. Mark had issues with Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament after their band Green River broke up badly. Kurt was a huge Mark Arm fan and took his side completely in that dispute. Kurt also thought Pearl Jam was being marketed as grunge without realizing they were being pushed by labels. Pearl Jam bassist Jeff Ament told Rolling Stone he had no idea what he did to Kurt. Jeff said if Kurt had a personal vendetta, he should come talk to them directly about it. Jeff thought Kurt must have deep insecurities about himself to attack them so much in the press. Pearl Jam guitarist Stone Gossard said Kurt's criticism actually made them better as musicians. It made them question whether they were doing things because they liked it or because they were sellouts. Eddie Vedder, the lead singer, decided to take the high road and never responded publicly against Kurt. But behind the scenes, things got tense between the bands at various music industry events. Then something amazing happened at the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards that year. While Eric Clapton performed Tears in Heaven on stage, Kurt and Eddie slow danced together backstage. Courtney Love appeared to push them together to make peace between the two feuding bands. Kurt later mentioned that he looked into Eddie's eyes and told him he was a respectable individual, but Kurt also said he still thought Pearl Jam's band sucked musically even after making peace. He admitted Eddie had passion as a performer though, which he respected about him. Eddie said he didn't remember what they talked about, just that it was normal conversation between them. So these are the reasons Kurt publicly feuded with Pearl Jam despite eventually becoming friends with Eddie Vedder. At number 4 we have the Grateful Dead. Kurt Cobain had intense hatred for the Grateful Dead and everything they represented in music and culture. In 1992, he wore a shirt that said, "Kill the Grateful Dead," during a photo shoot with photographers. This shirt has become one of the most iconic images of Kurt rejecting hippie culture completely. But the most shocking comment came in a 1992 Melody Maker interview. Kurt was ranting about what he hated about rock music in general at that time in his life. He said he hated cartoons and horns in rock music, which he found really annoying. He hated Phil Collins and all that white male soul music that was popular then. Then Kurt said he hated tie-dyed t-shirts too, which represented the hippie movement to him. Someone told him there were bootleg tie-dyed Nirvana t-shirts being sold at concerts without permission. This made him absolutely furious that people would do this to his band. Kurt then said he wouldn't wear a tie-dyed t-shirt unless it was dyed with Phil Collins's urine. He also said it would need to be dyed with the blood of Jerry Garcia too. Courtney Love overheard this comment from her bedroom and got annoyed by what he said. She asked Kurt how long he had been thinking about that particular insult to those musicians. But Kurt was completely serious about his hatred for the Grateful Dead and their entire scene. By the early 1990s, the Grateful Dead had become more of a traveling nostalgia business than real music. They represented the worst elements of the 1960s hippie movement to Kurt and his generation. Kurt couldn't stand the long jam songs or the whole peace and love culture around the band. Kurt wrote in his journal that he blamed his parents' generation for this failed movement. He said they came so close to social change, then just gave up and became corporate. Nirvana even mocked hippie culture in their song Territorial Pissings. The song opens with Krist Novoselic singing the chorus to the Youngbloods' 1967 hippie anthem, Get Together. It's about peace and love and trying something new together as one human family. But then the song explodes into aggressive chaos, completely destroying the hippie message on purpose. So, these are the reasons Kurt despised the Grateful Dead and rejected their entire hippie philosophy and lifestyle. At number 3, we have Metallica. Kirk Hammett personally called Kurt to invite Nirvana on their stadium tour, but Kurt refused because of who else was on the bill. In 1992, Metallica and Guns N' Roses were planning the biggest stadium tour in rock history together. They wanted Nirvana as the opener, creating a lineup that guaranteed sellout stadiums. Kirk Hammett, Metallica's lead guitarist, was friends with Kurt Cobain from the early days of grunge. Kirk had known Kurt since Nirvana's first album Bleach came out in 1989 from Sub Pop. They connected through music before the mainstream media even started calling it grunge. When Metallica played Seattle on their Black Album tour, Kurt called Kurt to invite him to the show. Kurt asked if they were going to play Whiplash, because that was his favorite Metallica song ever. During the performance that night, Kirk agreed and told Kurt, "This one's for you." So Kirk thought Kurt would be excited about touring together on the massive stadium run planned. Kirk made the phone call to Kurt to talk about joining the Guns N' Roses and Metallica tour. But Kurt just went on and on about how he didn't like what Guns N' Roses stood for. Kurt tried to convince him about the potential this opportunity held for Nirvana. He said Kurt could just go out there and represent Nirvana, play the show, and leave immediately. Kurt pleaded with him to reconsider, but Kurt wasn't having it at all about this tour. Lars Ulrich later explained the situation to NME magazine in 2004 about what happened. He said Kurt told Kirk he would play with Metallica anywhere in the world at any time. Kurt would step on any stage with Metallica without hesitation or second thoughts, but Kurt refused as long as Guns N' Roses was involved. It was a hard no. Kurt felt Axl Rose was the complete opposite of everything he believed in as a person. Nirvana manager Danny Goldberg confirmed there was lots of money on the table for the tour offer. Kurt really liked Metallica as a band and respected their music and ethics, but there wasn't enough money in the world to get Kurt to share a stage with Guns N' Roses. The issue was never about Metallica at all for Kurt or the band. Kurt respected them and loved their thrash metal sound and rebellious spirit. The problem was entirely with Guns N' Roses and what they represented to him personally. After Kurt's death in 1994, Metallica paid tribute to him many times over the years. James Hetfield listed Smells Like Teen Spirit as one of his favorite songs ever written. At number 2, we have Led Zeppelin. Kurt loved their guitar work but hated their sexist lyrics so much that he sold his entire collection for $12 and refused to ever tour with them. Kurt Cobain grew up as a huge Led Zeppelin fan during his early teenage years in Washington. When he got a guitar for his 14th birthday on February 20 in 1981, one of the first songs he learned was Stairway to Heaven. He loved the complex guitar work and the heavy sound that Led Zeppelin created with their music. Kurt listened to them constantly along with other bands like Black Sabbath and Queen throughout his childhood. His father played Queen's News of the World album on 8-track in his van all the time. Kurt heard it over and over during car rides, which influenced his early musical taste. But when Kurt discovered punk rock in his late teens, everything changed for him in a major way. In an Interview magazine conversation with writer Adam Snyder, Kurt revealed what he did with his collection. He said he sold his Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin collection for $12 total to a local record store. He completely threw away his hard rock roots and got into MDC and Black Flag punk bands instead. When asked if Led Zeppelin seemed uncool to him at that point in his life, Kurt said, "Yes, absolutely." Kurt told Rolling Stone in 1992 that he listened to Led Zeppelin and really enjoyed their melodies. It took him years to understand that the lyrics were about sexism and objectifying women. Kurt's manager, Danny Goldberg, backed this up in a 2019 interview promoting his book about working with Kurt. Goldberg said Kurt liked Led Zeppelin's music a lot, but felt uncomfortable with the sexist lyrics they wrote. Despite his criticisms of their lyrics, Nirvana did cover a few Led Zeppelin songs like Heartbreaker during sessions, but these were just for fun in the studio and never meant for public release or tours. Kurt would never tour with Led Zeppelin or promote them publicly to his fans. He refused to support bands that wrote lyrics degrading women in any form. At number 1, we have Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose kept calling Kurt Cobain, trying non-stop to get Nirvana on tour in 1992. Dave Grohl remembered walking through an airport when Kurt said, "Axl Rose won't stop calling me," with frustration. At first, Axl was a genuine fan of Nirvana before everything went bad. He wore a Nirvana hat in the Don't Cry music video that aired on MTV. Axl told Faith No More that he only liked a few bands and Nirvana was one of them. But he couldn't understand why all these bands hated him so much. Kurt's hatred for Guns N' Roses was intense and very public in the press. In a 1991 Seconds magazine interview, Kurt said they weren't a typical Guns N' Roses type band with nothing to say. In a 1992 Singapore publication, Kurt said rebellion is standing up to people like Guns N' Roses. But the harshest criticism came in the Advocate interview in 1993 when he spoke openly. Kurt called Axl Rose a sexist, a racist, and a homophobe to the magazine. He said, "You can't be on Axl's side and be on Nirvana's side at the same time." Kurt also said Guns N' Roses couldn't even write good music anymore. Kurt specifically hated the song "One in a Million," which had racist and homophobic slurs in the lyrics. The feud exploded publicly at the 1992 MTV Video Music Awards in September. Just 5 days before the awards, Axl said from the stage that Kurt was just a junkie with a junkie wife. Axl said if their baby was born deformed, they should both go to prison for it. This was right after the Vanity Fair article about Courtney possibly using drugs while pregnant. At the MTV Video Music Awards, backstage, Courtney saw Axl and sarcastically asked him to be their baby's godfather. Axl got genuinely mad and walked right up to Kurt with his bodyguards. According to Kurt, Axl came strutting by with 5 huge bodyguards and a movie camera. Axl told Kurt to shut his woman up or he'd take Kurt down to the pavement. Kurt sarcastically turned to Courtney and said, "Shut up," to mock Axl's demands. Kurt later said he was really scared of getting beat up by Axl and his crew. During Nirvana's performance of Lithium, Dave Grohl taunted Axl from the drums on stage. He shouted into the mic, "Hi Axl, where are you Axl?" over and over again. And that's why Guns N' Roses became Nirvana's biggest enemy. I told you to pronounce the date as we pronounce. The date you have pronounced is totally useless, sigh. So, these are the list of 10 bands Nirvana refused to tour with. Every decision Kurt made wasn't about fame, it was about staying true to what he believed in. Their choices shaped music history and showed that integrity matters more than popularity. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload.